All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to those from Singapore and Malaysia, and good evening to those in Australia. How are all of you? I hope you all are in the best of health. Thank you for taking the time to join us for our second webinar this year. This free webinar is proudly organized by Ilham Childcare together with our guest speakers from Singapore, Malaysia, and Australia. All of them are very experienced in early childhood education and very passionate about inclusivity too. Before we start, and while we wait for more of you to come on board for the live broadcast, let me introduce myself. My name is Mas, and I'm part of the Ilham Childcare team. We are an inclusive childcare center based in Singapore with an extension in Australia, Melbourne, too. I'm actually very nervous because this is my first time moderating a webinar. But at the same time, I'm very excited for today's session because we have a really great topic and very passionate panel of speakers with us today. In this webinar, we will be talking about inclusive learning and inclusive practices in early childhood education. We will get to know all of our speakers and have them share their perspective on today's topic of inclusivity. I'm pretty sure that we are going to have an insightful discussion today. I'm sure that many of you will have questions or comments for them. Please feel free to send it through the comments section that you see on your screen, and we will address some of the questions at the end of each speaker's session. Right, so without further ado, let's welcome our first guest speaker of the day. We have teacher Ashikin. She is one of our senior teacher at Ilham Childcare West, who is also our special needs champion. Hello, teacher Ashikin.
Hi everyone. Hi Mas, how are you?
Hi, Ashikin. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, Alhamdulillah.
All right, maybe teacher Shikin, you can tell us more about yourself personally and professionally.
Hi everybody. My name is Nurul Ashikin, and the children in Ilham called me Teacher Shikin, and I'm currently the active senior teacher and also special needs education champion in Ilham Childcare West.
All right, thank you, teacher Shikin, for that self-introduction. So for those of you out there who don't know, teacher Shikin has been with Ilham Childcare for 3 years, and she has handled children from playgroup all the way to kindergarten. Teacher Shikin, could you share a little bit about what you do at Ilham Childcare as the special needs champion teacher?
Alright, okay. As a special needs champion, I will basically assist the teachers and guide them in teachers in different levels of classes on how to plan the right strategies on handling the children in their classroom, and also planning and inclusive lessons that can actually engage both special and typical children. And also the main part of being a special needs champion is actually to share resources and findings that I've learned or I've used in classes with the staff and the caregivers of the children too, because basically to provide a special needs child a better learning opportunity, a schooling experience, it actually takes a village, which is everyone who is involved with the child. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard about this role in any other center or schools. So recently, just to share with all of you out there, Teacher Shikin has also decided to take a step further into her career by taking up a specialized diploma. Why do you choose special needs education as your niche?
As we all know that childcare and kindergarten in Singapore are moving towards an inclusive program in schools, so I just feel that it is the right time to equip myself with the knowledge of special needs education. It is so that every child in every class will have a better learning opportunity, and that no child of any differentiation will be left out.
All right. So it's really good that Ilham Childcare is supportive of teachers who wants to actually continue their studies, right? So what advice would you give to teachers who are on the fence about pursuing their studies in the niche, and how can they go about it?
Honestly, there is no perfect advice for something that, if you are really passionate about something and you really want to learn something that you interested in, and if you are willing to take the leap to into venturing out and gaining more knowledge you like or love, just go for it. I mean, in a way, you will definitely learn something new and you can eventually apply them in your working days.
Okay. So I want to understand this. So being in inclusive preschool, this means that your students in your class can be a mixture of students with or without special needs, right?
Yes, of course. And if you see a class as a whole, definitely each class will have one or two children with some learning difficulties, not only special needs. And we as educators or caregivers should really put the child's needs first and then followed by their learning difficulties or their developmental disabilities.
Okay. So are there any positive impacts that having special needs children or students in the class brought to the other typical students?
Definitely there is. I mean, you can see, especially the pre-kinders and the kinders children, you can see them being more responsible in taking care of each other, and they ensure that everyone is in a very safe setting and welcoming setting. And also children are aware that not all their friends are the same, and everyone is different and unique in their own different ways. And also children shows more empathy towards each other. Then also for the younger ones, they are all friends with each other, no matter what or how different they may look. And basically, there is just the pure love, innocent love of a child.
Right. Okay. So that's about the students in the class. So how about parents? Parents who actually send their child in Ilham childcare. So has there been any instances where parents are concerned about their children having to share a classroom and teacher attention with students with special needs, children with special needs?
Alhamdulillah, so far the parents in the school Ilham Childcare, they are all very supportive, and they know and they are aware of that Ilham is actually an inclusive school. So they don't really mind having a special needs child in their class, because at the same time they think that it's good for their child to be exposed to different people, different environment, to embrace differences in the society.
Right. So you've been with Ilham Childcare for more than 3 years now, right? Could you share with us some experience you have with special needs children while working in Ilham Childcare, and how are they positively impacted with the inclusion?
Okay, in the beginning, honestly, it was quite challenging as I was not prepared for any of the special needs children, because I do not have the knowledge of the to-dos and the don'ts with them. But after a while, when I actually sit down, with in the classes, making observation with these children, learning about their behavior, their antics, and what they like and what they don't, and how they actually go about every day from morning until the end of the day. So I just noticed that the special needs children need that extra attention, and teachers just need to give them more resources, and just to give them a little bit more love to get them to be involved and engage in everyday learning classroom environments and activities. And definitely there are major changes that I need to take in consideration when having a special needs student in class, like the physical environment, whether it need to be safe for them, whether they can actually be seated together with the rest of the class, and how you plan and structure your lesson as a teacher. But all in all, actually, it creates a better learning experience, especially for the rest of the class, as you know, learning will always be an incidental learning for them, where every day and every time is a learning process for them. So it also, I mean, for the children, they actually become more aware, more welcoming of differentiation with the people and surrounding. That also helps to enhance their social emotional skills.
All right. Thank you, Teacher Shikin, for sharing your experience, your story. So maybe we can actually answer some questions that we have from the audience. So for the rest of you, for the rest of the audience out there who's watching with us live right now, maybe you can send your questions, any questions for Teacher Shikin through the comment section, and we will try our best to answer them. Okay. So let's see if there's okay. All right. We have a question from Mr. Azhar. There are some parents who will need to take time to accept the condition of their child. Do you have some words of advice for those who are in this position?
Mm, okay, understandable that you want your child to have a very good environment, very, a place where their academic learning will not be jeopardized in a way, but some way that you just have to tell us, just to remind the caregivers and the parents that this to for them to be in a classroom with special needs children, it actually can help them to be more, like I've mentioned earlier, to be a better person when they are growing up, because they will learn a lot more of social skills, a lot more emotional skills.
All right. Thank you, Teacher Shikin. Thank you, Mr. Azhar, for your questions. Maybe we have other questions. All right. From Miss Nadia. An inclusive preschool serves children with and without disabilities in the same. What are some of the challenges that you face when handling a class with a mix of diversities?
The
Teacher Shikin?
main one is sorry. The main one is actually getting the attention of the whole class, because as you know, special needs children will have their own set of activities, and the typical children will have the normal curriculum activities they need to do. So it at times, yes, it may be disruptive, but as a teacher you need to really learn how to manage your classroom very well, and you need to just strategize what you need to do to ensure that every child is getting the same learning opportunity as the rest.
All right. Thank you, Teacher Shikin. Thank you, Miss Nadia, for the question. All right. Maybe we have one more or two more questions from the audience. All right. From Madam Anna. How has it been juggling your studies and career? Could you share your experience in pursuing a diploma in special needs while working full time at Ilham Childcare?
Juggling studies and career, I think I have been doing it for quite some time. So actually, it's for some it might be hard, because working full time and learning part time, you have both works that you need to deal with at the end of the day. So, but in a way, it kind of like, if you are studying, you will take in new things, new knowledge that you have learned, and then when you're working, you can apply that knowledge itself. And then when you see that the knowledge that you apply, it doesn't work, or in the sense that something can be taught, you can go back to where you're studying, you can go back to your lecturer and ask for more advice. So it's kind of like win-win solution.
All right. Thank you once again to Teacher Shikin for joining us today and sharing your knowledge with everyone. I think everyone gets something, something out of your sharing today. Okay. Thank you, Teacher Shikin.
All right,
Looking
thank you
forward
so
to see you
much.
again.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right. So, how is everyone currently right now? I hope that every one of you, all the audience, actually learn one or two learning points that you get from the sharing from Teacher Shikin. Okay, so for those of you who actually joined us for our first webinar in February this year, you might find this next speaker to be quite familiar, because this is actually his second time joining us for our webinar. Okay, so let's welcome Mr. Ashraf.
Hello, everybody.
As-
Hello, Mas.
Hi, how are you, Mr.
Assalamualaikum.
Ashraf? Waalaikumsalam. Thank you for
Alhamdulillah.
taking the time to join us again today.
No problem. My pleasure.
All
Always
right.
glad to
So,
be able to speak.
okay. All right. Great. So, Mr. Ashraf, maybe you can introduce yourself to our new audiences that are joining for the first time about yourself, your business, the industry that you are in.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ashraf. Assalamualaikum. I'm Ashraf Samsudin. I have been working in this sector of learning disabilities or learning disorders for the past 15 years now. So I'm now currently in Melbourne with my family and we've been here for roughly about 2 years. It's been a lovely 2 years, Alhamdulillah. Despite the COVID and despite the challenges, it has been quite a good stay and a rewarding one. Yeah. So so my experiences is in a way quite specialized in terms of the area of learning disorders. So I used to work with the Dyslexia Association of Singapore. Now I am working with an organization in a similar capacity as an education consultant with an organization called Speld Victoria. While at the same time, myself together with my other founders, we have decided to establish AimSPARKE. And AimSPARKE is an organization, it's a company, it's an educational center that aims to deliver evidence-based instruction to all learners, yeah, with the objective of enabling our young learners to be able to read, write, spell, while at the same time being happy playing around by the time they enter school. So that's really what we aim to be doing at this point in time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ashraf, for the self introduction. I think it's amazing that what you are doing with AimSpark Australia and Spelt at Australia. So, what was the spark behind this initiative, and why made it inclusive?
Um, I suppose uniquely to Australia here, there are not that many students here we find that's able to uh, read and write and also count, do math very well before they enter prep school, which is the equivalent of K2 or even and going on to P1. So they're not able to read and write quite fluently. And the reason why that is because they're not taught properly prior to entering school, and that's why they don't have that ability. So we've decided to band together and provide that service, focusing on literacy and numeracy. And the way that we do it is such that it is beneficial for all learners. Okay, so because inclusive is such a big word, we start off with students with learning disorders and learning disabilities. But because at the preschool age, you're not able to diagnose someone yet, so perhaps if parents decide that, oh, maybe you feel that there's something wrong, so don't worry about labels just yet. Just bring them to us. We will teach your kids how to read and write regardless of their ability. Yeah, because we know how to do it.
Okay, great. So, with
Yeah.
many years of experience within the field, Mr. Ashraf has definitely seen and worked with many different kinds of students and parents alike. So, is there a distinct difference between the educational approach to students with special needs in Australia and as compared to Singapore, Mr. Ashraf?
I would say that in Singapore, Singapore takes a more structured approach to addressing students with learning disorders or learning disabilities. In primary school, for example, they have a lot of support. So starting from the minute you enter primary one, you have to go through some sort of screening, and if you're flagged to be having difficulties with reading, then you get sent to the LSP. And by the end of P3, if you continue to struggle, then you'll be sent off to go for a full assessment. And if you're found to be having dyslexia, then you go on to be getting support either from the DAS or in school itself. Over here, it is pretty much dependent on what the principal decides to do. Although the law does mandate any child with a diagnosis to have equal access in schools, but how the school decides to support the child really depends on how well educated the school leaders are in terms of how to support this child. Yeah, so inclusivity is quite fashionable. Yeah, so everybody wants to be inclusive.
Yep.
But how well you know and how you define inclusion depends on the interpretation of the individual schools. Let me just put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm.
Okay. So, as an experienced educator to gifted students, I should say, what are the changes you have seen in the education industry so far? And how has the public's perception changed over the years regard to this inclusive learning?
Right. So first off, I mean, gifted students are students. Just going into a bit of definitions again. So gifted students are essentially students with exceptional abilities. Either they could be incredibly intelligent, they could have certain specific skills, extraordinary skills in soccer or in art or in cooking or in some other extracurricular stuff that they are really good in, right? So that's for students with giftedness. Then there are, of course, on the other hand, students with disabilities. And these could be students with a physical disability, intellectual disability, or a learning disorder. Yeah. And of course, there are students that that would fall in between. So they are gifted and at the same time they are disabled. So these are what we term as twice exceptional learners. So in terms of the changes that I've seen in the education industry so far, in Singapore, for example, you have a giftedness program and you have programs specific for students with a learning disorder. Yeah, so it's either or, right?
Yep.
So we have progress as such. Quite similar in case to Melbourne. I mean, they do try to support all learners, those better achieving ones and those who are falling behind. So there are attempts to see. The students who are actually struggling will be the students with the overlap of both. So the gifted students and the learning disordered child, for example, because if you try to slow down, actually you don't need to slow down. You just need to be able to teach the way that they learn for them to be able to progress. Because if you were to slow down, they are actually intelligent. They don't need slowing down. Might get bored. So when they get bored, they misbehave. So again, it revolves around teacher education, and I think both countries, both Singapore as well as Australia, has got some way in equipping their teachers with the right skills and knowledge to support students of all abilities in that sense effectively.
Okay. All right. Good. Okay. So, parental involvement plays an important part in the development, especially in a preschool setting. As a parent yourself, maybe you can share us some thoughts or some tips on how others can go about managing their children who might be facing these challenges in learning.
Mm. So when it comes to challenges in learning, learning itself again is quite broad. So let's say, for example, if your child is having difficulties with reading and writing, yeah. So the first thing is don't wait. Don't wait and think that okay, let's give them some time. Try to seek help as soon as possible. Try to get yourself acquainted with the best way to teach reading, because there is a right way to teach reading and there's also a wrong way to teach reading as well as writing. Yeah, so if you are able to learn the best way to teach your child how to read, write, and to count, for example, and yet they are in a way continue to face challenges, then perhaps you might need to seek professional help. But the first pit stop is number one, to educate yourself with the right skills and knowledge in supporting your child in equipping them with the basic skills in reading, writing, and counting. Yeah, and learning in general. So learning also includes helping your child to manage their own behavior. Yeah, so the best person to teach is actually the parents themselves. So we would need to be good models at home. Yeah, because most of the learning happens at home. The home is the first madrasah for the child. Yeah.
Sorry. So sorry. right. So sorry, Mr. Ashraf, for that.
No problem.
Okay. So
It happens
okay.
sometimes.
Yeah, it's sudden. It suddenly happened. Yeah, I don't. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe okay. So maybe it's we can actually see any questions for Mr. Ashraf from the audience, so that you can actually answer some of the questions from the audience out there. Okay, let's see. From Coke. Okay, so it's a great effort to create an inclusive learning in the school. Many focus on the students, but how do we support teachers as not many teachers have the right skills or same passion in this area?
I think that's a really great question, because when we talk about inclusivity and inclusiveness, it begins with the teacher. Yeah. The whole idea of inclusiveness starts with this thing called universal design. And universal design actually started off from architecture, So building so that it's accessible to everyone. Yeah. So in inclusiveness in education, you're actually looking in how to make the curriculum, the instruction available for everyone, all sort of learners. So in fact, the first person that needs to be well knowledge and educated would be the teachers. Yeah. So if we limit our definition of inclusivity to students with maybe the first year, which is the most common, students with dyslexia or students with a learning disorder of reading, for example, then the teachers would need to have adequate knowledge in terms of what dyslexia is, what a specific learning disorder is, what the needs of those children are, because then with that sort of knowledge, then they're able to design the curriculum proactively, as well as the instruction of delivery, to be able to cater to not only the dyslexic child, but to all learners. Yeah. So having said that as well, if the teacher is also well equipped with knowledge of the reading science, for example, right now the buzzword in reading is the science of reading, our knowledge of how the brain actually learns how to read. So if we have that sort of knowledge, we would be able to teach reading, writing, spelling, math in a way which is friendly for all learners. Yeah. And not having to consciously consider, or you're a dyslexic learner, so I teach you a bit differently, or you're a typical learner, so I teach you differently. So now if we teach one way, and that particular way would be friendly or effective for all sorts of learners.
Okay, all right. So
And there are many
hopefully that
courses on that.
answers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So thank you, Mr. Ashraf, for the answer. So is there any
Sure.
more questions for Mr. Ashraf? All right, from Mr. Azman Ali. So what does the research say about including gifted students in the regular education classroom?
So by gifted students, again, I think I had in a way defined the term giftedness earlier on, but I think perhaps including all learners of all abilities into a classroom, I think that's perhaps more pertinent. So in research, there's this thing called universal design for learning, and these are essentially a set of principles. Okay, so for those of you who want to take down, you can. So it's called UDL for short, Universal Design for Learning. Okay. So would be a set of principles whereby teachers, instructors, trainers would need to, in a way, think about to enable us to design our content, design our curriculum, design our lessons in such a way that they are made accessible for all students of all sort of abilities. And they have three strands. The first strand is thinking about the way in which you represent information. Yeah. So when you talk about represent information, you are thinking about different ways, methodologies to deliver information. So the teacher delivering information. How are you delivering the information? How are you delivering your lesson in a way that's accessible for all? Are you just talking, for example? So this is a very classic, very bad way of doing lesson. Yeah. So I'm just talking. Okay. So single modality. So that's not the best way to deliver a lesson. Yeah. So a good way to deliver a lesson would be to engage both, at least two modalities, one visual and the other one auditory. And of course, if you can to engage the students by including them further, that's also an approach which includes all sorts of learners. The second strand would be looking at action and expression, looking at multiple ways that allows students to express their ideas. Yeah. So in a way, thinking about how can I, in a way, design my lesson such that my students are able to express themselves in different ways. Okay, not just by raising their hands and talking, right? Are they able to express their ideas through maybe perhaps the use of a picture? Are they able to express their ideas through some kind of drama, a short sketch, for example? Are they able to express themselves in a diagram, ideas? Things like so. Providing them with multiple ways in which they are able to express their ideas, express what they know, what they have learned to you, so that you know that they have, in a way, taken away what they need to take away from that particular lesson. The third strand would be providing multiple means of engagement, which looks at exactly how you are planning for students and yourself, intra and inter. So you interacting with the kids and how the kids are interacting with themselves. How are you, in a way, building a community such that there's no sort of discrimination between them? Are they comfortable with mingling with one another? Do they feel a big sense of community? Yeah, so those are, in essence, the three strands. So you can read up a bit more just by doing a quick search on either YouTube or on Google. Just type UDL, Universal Design for Learning. It's relevant for you are teaching early childhood, primary school, secondary school, or especially in the tertiary levels. I was just conducting one lecture for the equivalent of the ITE here in Australia, and I was talking to them about this similar concept. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's UDL, right?
UDL, yeah, Universal Design for Learning.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Mr. Ashraf, for sharing your
You're
thoughts on
welcome.
this topic. It's a very insightful conversation so far, and really sorry about the technical issues just now. So I'm sure
No,
that
it happens.
the audience have learned a lot from your sharing, Mr. Ashraf. Thank you so much, and we hope to see you
You're welcome.
again in our
Alhamdulillah.
next webinar.
Yeah, no problem. Hope you guys have enjoy yourself and see you again.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Right. So how is it so far? I hope that everyone actually learned a lot from only these two sharers, actually, from Teacher Ashikin and Mr. Ashraf. Okay. So next, let's welcome our third speaker, Miss Charlene Samuel, the director of Autism Behavioural Center, also known as ABC from Malaysia. Hello, Miss Charlene.
Hi, Mas.
Hi, hello. Did I pronounce your name correctly, Miss
That's
Charlene or
correct.
Charlene? Okay,
No,
all right.
Charlene. Charlene is right. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Okay, so maybe Miss Charlie, you can actually tell us more about yourself. Self introduction and introduce your business or the industry that you're in currently.
All right, thank you. So my name is Charlene. I'm the director and owner of ABC Autism Behavioural Center in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We've been around right now, ABC particularly, coming on to 5 years. Prior to ABC, I was actually a therapist myself. So in the field, I think this might be my 12th or 13th year, I think. So the passion stemmed actually from the opportunity to actually work with children on the spectrum primarily. And I was specifically trained for ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, and I just completely fell in love with the science because you make these changes from a child that's completely non-verbal to a child then is able to request, to label things, to have a conversation with you, who is now socializing with you. It's very, very reinforcing. So that's how my journey started. So I started off as a therapist, and at that point of time, I didn't think of opening a company. But a few years into the job, I felt just so passionate, and I felt that there needs to be more support So there are a couple of main players here in Malaysia. ABC is one of them as well. We are the largest intervention center in Malaysia, but there are so many intervention centers for families to choose. But this was not the case, 5, 10 years ago. There was actually just a handful of interventionists. And most importantly, the reason why I I had the thought of, bringing more evidence-based intervention to Malaysia is because there is just so little progression in training, in skills. So ABA specifically came from the States, it's properly regulated over there. Malaysia is very far from that. Hopefully in the next 5 to 10 years, we will get there. And because of that as well, we see a lot of application of ABA, but sometimes it's not really ABA as well, because again, it's individual interpretation of what has been learned. So when I opened ABC, the aim was to bring international standards of intervention to Malaysia, which is at that point non-existent. We are still the first to bring it here. So how we implement ABA is through PATAN technology, which is Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. Our programs, our teaching procedures is based on that. And this was developed by Dr. Amiris and Mr. Mike Miklos. They are both board certified behavior analysts. So I had a dream, we achieved it, and we've been strong. This September, it would be 5 years for us implementing international standards of intervention here in Kuala Lumpur.
All right. So, wow, just wow. That's definitely a great business with such kind intention. Actually, right. So when my team and I were preparing for this webinar, we were actually looking for the perfect speaker to join our panel. And actually, you were the first one in our list. So we are really glad that you could join us today to talk about or to speak about inclusivity. And also, it's an area of your expertise, which happens to be dealing with children with ASD. So maybe, Miss Charlene, I feel that you and your team at ABC Malaysia has gone through quite a number of ups and downs in your first few years of operations. So maybe you can tell us more about your journey and how you started it.
Okay, I think you're referring to many, many years ago. This was actually
Yes.
before ABC.
Oh,
It was
okay.
not ABC at that point of time. We were a small company operating home-based services, and it was called Autism Consultancy. So ABC is actually a work in progress of, I would say, 8 or 9 years of my career. So back then, we started really small. We opened up a really modest intervention center in a private guarded housing area, and it was not well received by the residents. Short story, basically, we were asked to leave within 24 hours, and we will not be able to actually operate from the center. At that point of time, it was a home, basically. And it made headlines in Malaysia, actually. So we came from very modest, humble beginnings of, not even being able to actually run and operate. And fast forward about, I think it's been a while right now. I think it was about 6, 7 or 8 years ago. It's been a very long time. And fast forward, many, many years later, today we are the largest intervention center in Malaysia. So that was our humble beginnings. It didn't start very, very great. A lot of bumps along the road, but I think what I personally learned was perseverance. You don't give up on what you're passionate in, right? And
Yep.
here we are today.
Wow, that's really inspiring to hear and see how far you have come actually. Okay, so
Thank you.
you were mentioning about ABA, right? Just
Yep.
now. So what is it and can you share more about ABA?
Sure. So oftentimes ABA is called Applied Behavior Analysis, and it's coined ABA therapy. Actually, ABA is not therapy. ABA is actually a science, and this is a huge misconception. So an ABA, the science of teaching, is basically based on motivation. If we can identify what motivates and rewards a person, it could be you and I, it could be a child, it could be an adult, it could be anyone actually. This science is applicable to every single human being. Not even humans, actually. The science of ABA is very vast. We can basically change behavior. So we can reward certain behaviors to ensure it happens again. we can ensure it doesn't happen again by not rewarding those behaviors. So this is the science of ABA. So ultimately what we do is basically we teach the core component skills. So it's very interesting actually hearing from many of the speakers earlier that, some of the focus we're looking at academic skills, social skills, which is great. But however, in ABC, it's a little bit different. We focus on the fundamentals of learning. Basically, we teach children to learn. So, based on ABA, like I said, ABA is a science, but how you apply it will differ. So, for example, if you went to another intervention center, how they would apply ABA would be very different to how we would apply ABA. However, the foundation of using reinforcement to change behavior, to increase socially appropriate behavior is there. It's the same. But we focus primarily on, what's the fundamentals of learning? Number one, how do we learn? We learn through imitation, the ability to copy. So that's one of the first skills we teach children. Let's learn to imitate, basically,
Yes.
And oftentimes, if you think about it, everything in life we learn is to some form of copying or imitation. How do we learn to cook, to ride a bike, to read a book, to play the piano? Everything was actually you observed somebody doing it and you tried and you copied and you imitated. But oftentimes what we see on the spectrum is these core component skills of learning is either underdeveloped or not developed. So, what do? We basically teach these core component skills so that they can learn to imitate, and the end goal is to learn anything actually if you can imitate. So imitation is just one of the many skills. We teach children to request, we teach children to label things. We also work heavily on behavior management because there are many listeners and viewers here today. Generally what makes autism stand out is the behavior repertoire. So we usually see repetitive behaviors, we see rigid behaviors, insistence of sameness, don't like changes, they like it being done the same way every day, we see odd repetitive behaviors like hand flapping, running in circles, lining things up. So these are, in part of behavior, this is what we address. Because in the end of the day, behaviors like even temper tantrums and meltdowns are very, very common on the spectrum because language and communication is not developed yet. So until that is developed, sometimes we see lots of behaviors because there is no other way to communicate. If I'm hungry, if I'm tired, if you didn't share that toy with me, or if I miss mommy, or why am I in this place? I don't know where I am. All of the response is the same. It's basically crying or having a tantrum. So, one of the fundamental skills we also work on in ABC very early on, children as young as 16 to 18 months starting in ABC, we work immediately on communication, imitation, behavior management. So these are all of the core component skills in basically preparing children to learn more effectively in like inclusive, schools like Ilham or schools here in Malaysia.
All right. So as a parent myself, I think I find it interesting with whatever you shared just now. So how can actually a new parents know that maybe it's time to actually see a specialist or interventionist?
That's a very good question. So number one, I believe some of the speakers mentioned, please don't wait. Now, there are many resources available online, and some of the resources, I could just name it to you. The most useful resource I would recommend is called an MCHAT, Modified Checklist for Autism in Toddlers. So it's Malaysia, China, Auckland, Thailand. Okay, so if you Google that, you will find a free screening tool. If your child is anywhere between 16 to 30 months, you can use this tool. It's just a series of 20 questions. And what these 20 questions basically is assessing is two things. Number one, is your child hitting their milestones? So the milestones will come in form of language, behavior, milestones like pointing, being able to take instructions. And additionally, if the score comes out as risk, we are matching it to what we usually see in the spectrum. So are we looking at odd behaviors or, insistence of sameness or lack of eye contact or not responding to the name? So, for the viewers here attending today, my recommendation is if you have a child is as young as 16 months, you can already do it. Unfortunately, if your child is younger than that, you'll have to wait. But if you're going to use the MChat tool, 16 to 30 months, it's a free resource on the internet, a series of 20 questions. The answer is only yes and no. And when you click enter, you get your results immediately. And the results only come out in 3 scores. Number 1, low risk for autism. So usually, you know, if you score 1 or 0, it's low risk, means your child is most likely not in the spectrum. But if your child is less than 2 years old, it's going to ask you to reassess your child after 2. Yeah, just to be sure. Secondly, it will come out as moderate and high risk for autism. So generally, the MChat is very useful. And this is actually the first screening tool that many pediatricians are also trained to use. So if you were to go and see your pediatrician and if you say, I think my child is not talking, does he have a speech delay? Oh, I think my child has autism, he's not responding when he called his name, you know. Oftentimes, what they're going to do first is they're going to do an MChat. And oftentimes, you know, families don't know that this is actually a resource that you can just Google up and do it on your own, you know. And very, very quickly, within less than 5 minutes, you'll be able to identify, as a parent, do you have to be concerned? And this is the indicator, basically. Do you have to be concerned, or can you take a deep breath? You know, and of course, this is just one of the ways you can get support. So if you get a score that says, hey, you know, it will actually state your child scored as moderate risk for autism, please, you know, make an appointment with your pediatrician and start early intervention services. So it actually gives you a clinical recommendation immediately. So you're not left like, should I see a doctor, or should I start therapy? The results is actually pretty straightforward, because, for example, one of the milestones it's checking is your child pointing at objects with one finger, objects that they're interested in, objects that they want. And pointing is actually a milestone that's very early developed, actually before 12 months, you know. So if your child is 2 or 30 months, 2.5 years old, and he's not doing it, that is a huge red flag. Yeah. So that is the first, free resource that young parents can use. It's called the MChat. Secondly, some of the red flags you need to look out for in general is your child pointing, you know. And when I mean pointing, you should be able to see these milestones develop generally between 12 to 15 months. You don't have to wait till your child is 3 or 4 or 5, you know. From very young, you can already identify, is your child pointing? You know, when you call your child's name, do they respond? So we're not really expecting for, yes, mommy. No, not quite. Do they at least look at you? You know, do they stop what they're doing? Do they smile at you? Is there any form of response to their name? You know, one of a good skill to check out for is also, are they responding to simple common instructions at home? You know, like wash your hands, go throw away, kiss mommy, hug daddy, you know, whatever that you use a lot at home. And again, because it's so repetitive in nature, or eat, you know, sit down. These are simple instructions that your child should be able to pick on actually before they're 2 years old, you know. So there's actually a lot of red flags that we can look out for. And if your child's not hitting those milestones, it already indicates to you that you need to keep an eye on it, and you can already start seeing a developmental pediatrician or your general pediatrician to just, suss out if you have to be worried. But my advice to parents is, I would rather you be overcautious rather than, thinking that everything's going to be fine. I believe, the culture in Australia might be a little bit more different than Asian culture like Malaysia and Singapore. But over here, what we usually, the belief is like, your child is a boy. Boy always speak late, And yes, there is some evidence to that, but we're not looking at 2 or 3 years delay in speech,
Yep.
So, in Malaysia, it's so often to hear that. And then, the grandma, grandpa, grandfather, grandmother would say, don't worry, at 5 years old, he will start talking a lot, And you're really lucky if your child only has a speech delay, because speech delay is one of the red flags, the symptoms we see in autism. But with autism, we see the speech delay come with behaviors. We see it come with lack or inappropriate socialization. So it's not singular, just a speech delay. So if your child just has a speech delay, it's very easy to identify. Basically, your child cannot communicate expressively like other children, but they can understand everything. But what we
Okay.
usually see on autism is they cannot express themselves, neither can they follow instructions, neither can they understand you. So these are the huge red flags. Yeah. So, you can look up for pointing, language development, understanding of language. This is what you can just check for. And for families that has access to the internet, which I think should be most of us, just look out MCHAT. MCHAT stands for Modified Checklist for Autism in Toddlers. This is used only for children 16 to 30 months. So too young, you can't use it. Too old, it's not going to be applicable. If you use it, the data is not valid, basically.
All right. That's a very good sharing, Miss Charlene, actually. So
No
actually I
problem.
learned one or two things from there to see
Okay,
actually.
great.
Yeah. Okay. So I've actually seen that ABC had a partnership with Sunway Putra Mall, making Malaysia first autism friendly mall. So that is very, very interesting. I didn't know that certain features in a shopping mall could actually affect them. Can you share with us more about that?
All right. Okay, so we were really, really, lucky to work with such an amazing company of people that were willing to take a step forward to include people with and children with autism and special needs. Because going to a public space like a mall can be very daunting. Many people, I'm sure across the world, it's not just Malaysia, many people are quite educated. They know what is autism, but actually on the flip side, there are many people who do not understand. So part of this initiative, firstly, we started off before the facilities came to place. That's what everybody sees right now, all of these amazing calm rooms and sensory walls. But prior to that, a lot of work was done. So it was a lot of training was involved. So we trained the frontliners in Sunway Putra Mall. We trained all of the guards. Basically, not we, I train. So I'm the main trainer for
Main
Sunway Putra Mall.
person. Yeah.
Yeah, so we train the guards, the security guards, the police bantuan, the help from the police, and all of the malls, the vendors that were participating in this initiative, they came for trainings as well. And what the trainings included was basically how to identify autism, because
Mhm.
people on the spectrum generally are not going to come up to you and say like, hey, I have autism, I'm going to struggle in this. Usually what you're going to see is families that are trying to go about their day and just probably get some shopping done, but sometimes it's not as easy, for you and I, just like you and I, it's much harder for them. So the training included identifying autism, and most importantly, how do you include and accommodate and support families and individuals that are on the spectrum. So, this is all pre-COVID. It was really fun. Because there was so much of interaction. Now we can't do that anymore. So the training came into place first, and then we had the facilities that came into place. So from what I know, if I'm correct, there are two calm rooms right now. So these are isolated rooms that families can actually go and get some privacy. So the reason why there is the calm rooms came into play was oftentimes, not always, because we have to remember that autism is a spectrum disorder. We have individuals that are mildly affected, moderately affected, and severely affected. So of course, different individuals will respond differently. Yeah. So not everybody's going to need a calm room, but it is very beneficial for individuals on the spectrum that have challenges with sensory. So overstimulation of their sensory. So the lights are too bright. The announcements are just too loud, or the too many people walking up and down. It's too busy. You're in my space. So the calm room basically supports with that. You're completely cut off from the rest of the mall. You're in the mall, but it's very quiet, it's very soothing. The room is built and designed in the way that the moment you step in, you feel really calm, actually. Even myself, not being on the spectrum, I actually the rooms are really beautiful. So for families that are also probably needing a break from 2-3 hour shopping, they can go into the calm room, allow for some rest, allow for their child on the spectrum that has challenges with sensory issues to kind of recenter, refocus, calm down, take a little break, and then go about to, back home or back to shopping again. So number one is a sensory room. So I would say that would be the biggest investment in the mall, followed by the sensory walls. So the sensory walls are generally for individuals on the spectrum, and this is also present with individuals with sensory processing disorder. So we see two conditions when it comes to oversensitivity or undersensitivity of sensory stimulus. We see hypersensitivity. A condition called hypersensitivity means the individual or the child is oversensitive to sensory stimulus. So, lights could be too bright. Certain textures could, they can't wear certain textures. They need to cut off the tags at the back of their shirt. They're very picky eaters. And then we have the opposite, where there is not enough sensory stimulus. So we call this hyposensitivity. So these are, children or individuals that as they walk around the mall, they need to touch everything. They need to put everything into their mouth. They would go up to a speaker perhaps and put their ear right at the speaker so that they can hear the sound because they want more sensory stimulus. So the sensory walls were catered to individuals that are hyposensitive. So basically they need sensory stimulation. So the walls kind of give them the proper place, the right place to do what they need to do, and it gives them the sensory stimulation in a more socially appropriate, place that is provided by Sanviputra Mall. So, I mean, it was such an amazing initiative because nobody thought to, put so much of effort into getting, so many people in the mall trained. And the training is still ongoing because, in malls, people come in and people come out, vendors change, staff change. So actually the training is ever going, but the facilities are already there. But it's just a matter of continued training to ensure there is continuous support and education for the people on the ground to support individuals and families on the spectrum.
All right. Okay. Actually, we have a question from the audience for Miss Charlene.
Sure.
Okay. So, okay, may I ask, okay, from Mr. Cook, okay, so may I ask if the interventions you provided are catered to child by child basis? If yes, how do you then integrate the child back into the society, which is not a controlled environment?
Okay, really good question. Yes, our intervention is individualized. It's necessary actually, because as I mentioned, autism is a spectrum disorder. So there is no one size fits all. How we would work with an individual that's high functioning and how we would work with an individual that is severely affected, who is non-verbal and has a lot of behaviors, is completely different. So there is no way that we would be working with, several individuals the same way. Yeah, but the foundation is similar, which is applied behavior analysis. Now, how do we integrate a child back into basically control environment? I'm sure they're referring to school here, like in inclusive schools like Ilham, or even mainstream schools. So number one, the most important that we always focus on, as I mentioned, we focus on communication. We focus on the building blocks of learning like imitation. And we need to focus heavily on behavior management. So when we look at ABA, when we're looking at the clinical side of, intervention, why behavior management? So when I mean behavior, we're looking at negative behaviors like temper tantrums, meltdowns, biting things, pushing, the reason why it needs to be addressed first in intervention is because this is what we call boundaries of learning. As long as a child is engaging in these behaviors, they cannot learn effectively. Yeah, so generally we would never, recommend a child that has all these behaviors to let's have a go at going to school right now, because if you can't control them in a controlled environment like therapy, you cannot expect it to suddenly happen in a more chaotic, environment like a school, because there's so many things going on at the same time. So to answer that question, we start with the foundation first, and this is a long-term journey for us. Oftentimes the science, the data that we have, generally intervention takes about 2 to 2.5 years to get a child ready to a point that they can slowly integrate into mainstream education, inclusive schools like Ilham. So it's not like a 1 or 2 month process, or 6 months or 7 months. We're looking at, about 2 to 2.5 years. And because we are also looking at a lot of skills, like, teaching a child to communicating with one word is not enough. They need to be speaking like their peers. They need to be playing like their peers. Otherwise you are basically throwing a child into the sea and say, okay, you swim, but you did not give them any skills to swim. So in coming back to the integrity of services and support that we provide our children, it's so important that we give them the skills so that they thrive. So, just learning 1 or 2 words, or saying a handful of words, or being able to follow a handful of instructions is really not the prerequisite skills to be successful in schools. Yeah. And that would create a lot of challenges actually for inclusive schools like Ilham. If you get a child in school, though you have the best intentions, but they can't take any instructions. They can't sit down, do this, turn to page 1, take your pencil, color, throw this away, wash your hands. All of these instructions are just too much for them. Yeah. So, what I would focus on the early intervention first. ABA is the gold standard in autism treatment. Why? Because we have over 20 years of evidence, research to prove that it works, but you must start early. It must be intensive. The intensity here, we're looking at about 30 to 42 hours a week. So it's very intensive because we want to produce best outcomes. Yeah. But again, as I mentioned, autism is a spectrum. Some children only require 3 hours of therapy a day, and they are flying because they are very mildly affected. Yeah. But most of the individuals that we support, most young children that are diagnosed, they tend to fall on the moderate to severe end of the spectrum. Not so much because of behaviors, oftentimes it's just because of the gap of skills, particularly in communication. It's so big. Like, you could be a 3-year-old, but your language capabilities is of a child that is 12 to 15 months. That is very common. Means, what do you expect of a child that's 12 to 15 months? They can't communicate verbally, generally what they want, very minimal form of understanding of instructions, but they're already 3. So you can see that the gap is so big, hence the reason why the intensity of therapy is required. Yeah. So usually what we do is we start with very intensive therapy. When the child starts to hit at the level that they can request from their peers, they can take group instructions, they can respond together as a group. We start implementing minimal hours in school, and how we do it is usually with a shadow. So a shadow aid supports a child to transition into school. And this is only meant for transition. Once the child is stabilized, because the child already has skills, then we retract our services, and then the child is independent.
All right.
Yeah, so there's a formula to that.
Okay. Ken, thank you, Miss Charlene, for sharing your thoughts on this topic. I personally, I learned a lot from your sharing today. I'm sure the audience out there also learned a lot today. So inshallah, okay, we will see you again. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Mas.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too. All right. Okay, it's amazing, right? I've actually, myself personally, I've learned a lot, so much actually from the sharing from Miss Charlene. Okay, so without further ado, let's welcome our final guest speaker from Ilham Childcare HQ. We have with us Miss Revati, or Miss Rev, the curriculum specialist of Ilham Childcare. Hi, hello,
Hi.
Miss Revati.
Hi, Miss Mas. Hi.
Thank you for taking your time to join us for the webinar today.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, maybe for a start, you can actually introduce yourself to the audience or everyone at home.
Okay, hi guys. I'm actually Revati. I'm the curriculum specialist for both Ilham Childcare East and West. And so for my current job, I'm actually doing is training the teachers in curriculum matters, and also to ensure that they are following like guidelines and frameworks at Ilham Childcare, and to make sure that they are actually providing a holistic learning opportunity to all the children in Ilham. And then and then for myself is long story short, I actually began in Ilham as an inexperienced teacher. So I kind of like entered this program called the Place and Train program, which is sponsored by Ilham. So over this 1 year, I've actually worked and studied together in like Ilham, and then like I went to study in the school in KLC where they actually offered this program. So over this 1 year, managed to learn a lot of things, and then I'm got into like a normal teacher. So after being a teacher, the school actually kind of like looked at my potential. They kind of given me this role as a curriculum specialist. So after like I think about 4 years as a teacher of different kind of levels, I kind of like got into this curriculum specialist role. Yeah.
So in total, you have been with Ilham Childcare for 6 years?
Yes,
6 years.
6 years.
Wow, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
amazing. So
Yes.
okay, so when you first joined Ilham Childcare, do you know that Ilham Childcare was an inclusive childcare?
No, actually, I don't even know what is inclusive learning, because, like, as when I started this journey as a preschool teacher, I didn't know anything, so I was zero knowledge about childcare. So when I stepped into Ilham, they kind of like offered this as a part of their like I say learning, one of their goals or something, that they kind of valued the inclusive learning in Ilham. So after trainings, and also like like teaching trainings from the other like mentors and the other teachers, I kind of like understood what is the meaning of inclusiveness. And then with a lot of practice and also the culture of Ilham, they actually kind of like made me realize what is inclusive learning is all about.
All right. Thank you for sharing your story, Miss Shrif. So, how different would you say an inclusive curriculum is as compared to what would you call a regular preschool?
Okay. The difference between, I think the previous speakers have actually mentioned, but then for regular wise, it's more of structured. So it's a one thing for all kind of thing. So if you say inclusive is kind of a variety, and then catering to all the children needs. So over here at Ilham, we actually kind of like provide that inclusiveness for the different diversity kind of children. So here actually the teachers kind of do up their own lesson plans. It's actually a good thing, because we kind of like based on what the based on what the children kind of understand, and also their prior like knowledge, we kind of like change the lesson accordingly to their needs. So when the lesson is being carried out, they will make sure that each child will be able to like grasp the knowledge. So the teacher will kind of include like different kind of skills and techniques, and also like materials that the children will be able to get their attention with. So like I think the previous speakers also mentioned that the different learning skills will also affect how they kind of like being engaged in the lessons. So that is one of the things that you have to take note as a reflective practitioner. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, as a curriculum specialist, how do you ensure your teachers or yourself include activities to benefit both children with or without special needs?
Okay. We do have like meetings and trainings conducted internally. So we have like teacher Ashikin who goes for the course. So she kind of like comes in and share her knowledge, and then based on the current like teachers, they have like a few special need kids, right? So we kind of like they will share their thoughts and also what they have experienced in class, and then the other teachers will kind of also give their own feedback. And then to plan a proper diversify like lesson for all the children, we kind of like break down. So not also being said like on lesson wise, so you also have to like think about the environment. So let's say you are in an environment, so when the child the special child kind of like get lost
Mm.
or from the lesson, right? So she or he will be like interested in the environment instead. So this is where your learning corner activities, and also like your boards, your walls have to be more like sensorial, and also more engaging and interactive for them to be playing independently. So even without a teacher, this they can actually move around by themselves and exploring around the environment. So third space is actually very important. It's another teacher for them. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's read some of the comments or the questions given by the audience for Miss Rave. Hold on. Okay, from Madam Diana Tan, what can teachers do to encourage friendships and social connections in an inclusive classroom?
Okay. To encourage friendship. So like what you can do is in preschools we kind of like have free play. So other than lessons, we also have free play. So free play is where children are given like manipulatives, which like toys, construction tools where they can kind of play. So using these, they can get like children to play with groups or other people, like include more people, okay, into like constructing something. So this is where their communication will increase. They'll start to speak more, and then they'll speak more, and then they will be more interactive, verbalizing, and then kind of like this is where the friendship actually grows through play. And then other than that, through free play, there's lessons where the teachers can kind of like have group works. So how the children together share their ideas, or do some activity together to achieve a main goal in the lesson. So it so as a teacher, what you guys can do is you can observe and also give them prompts, prompting the children. It doesn't need to be like it's not a directed instruction or a prompt. You can like give like what the other speakers mentioned, that imitation. So as you can kind of like show what kind of you can be the one setting the example. So hey, why not you join me, that kind of thing. So this is the way you kind of like get them to get the idea, like, oh, you can actually ask these kind of questions to get them involved in other the playing, yeah,
Okay.
activity.
All right. Thank you, Miss Rave. So thank you, Madam Diana, for the questions. Maybe we have one more questions from the audience. From Miss Nurul Salbia. With the rising numbers of special friends, how do you ensure that each class does not have too much of these friends for the teacher to handle?
Okay. One thing is we need to take note is the teacher-child ratio. So that is one of the preschool kind of thing we have to take note of. And what the school can actually help is to get more teachers in. Yeah. So or teachers in, or you can actually send these teachers for help. Let them to be studying for like the special education. Let them know all the strategies or skills that they should know, the kind of knowledge to cater to the needs of all these different many friends of these people. So like since it's rising, right, I mean a lot of people, so what you can do is you can split the class up, so you can make it into a smaller group kind of thing. So split the class up, and then you can focus on a group, section it up kind of thing. So it's easier for the teacher to kind of handle as a small group and observe them. Yeah, observe them better.
All right. Thank you, Teacher Rafe. So thank you, Madam Nurul Salbia, for the question. So thank you, Miss Rafe, for joining us and sharing your knowledge with
Thank you.
everyone today. Hope to see you again. Thank you. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
All right. So that's all we've got time for today. I enjoyed the insightful sharing by all of the speakers, and I hope that everyone out there, all the audience, actually learned a thing or two as well. We hope to see you again in the next webinar, inshallah. So thank you and take care, everyone. Bye bye.